Today, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty of setting up short-term rental properties for others.
We've got some real gems of advice for you today.
From contracts that keep things clear, to not losing rights to those awesome photos, to everything in between.
This is a list of our top do's and don'ts for setting up a property for a client. But if you're someone who's hiring a designer to set a property up for you, it's a good video for you to watch as well.
Let's get started. Number one, do have a contract.
Having a well-drafted contract is more than just a formality.
It's a fundamental step in establishing a clear and effective relationship with your client.
When we were first getting started, many of our first clients were friends or family people.
Family
people. It did feel weird putting a formal contract in place.
So we had to have this sort of mindset shift that the purpose of the contract wasn't to anticipate problems, it was to set expectations and boundaries for both parties.
A good contract spells out the scope of the project, the timeline and the deliverables, and the responsibilities of both the designer and the client.
It's a safety net, making sure that everyone's on the same page about the project so that the whole process can run smoothly.
And if you want more details about what we put in our design proposal and our contract, we'll link a video on the screen for you to watch next.
Number two, do design for your target guest group, not just for your client.
Your client probably will use the house from time to time, so it's definitely important to consider their wants and wishes, but it's not the only factor when it comes to making design choices.
Designing a short-term rental property should extend beyond the taste of the client and really should be all about the experience for your ideal guest group.
Spend some time thinking about who that ideal guest group is, from the demographic to the age to their interests, and ultimately how they'll use the space.
You'll also want to have a look at other properties in your market, see what your competitors are doing, and see what kind of design might be lacking in your area.
A space that's heavily tailored towards the wishes of your client may not have a broad appeal to a short-term rental demographic that you're going after.
Maybe it will, but not always. So just keep in mind that we're always trying to blend what the client wants with what we know that guests will love.
This Airbnb is fantastic.
Number three is to make sure you secure the photo rights.
Securing photo rights for a project might seem like a technicality, but there are a few reasons why it shouldn't be overlooked.
First, you'll want to have a portfolio of sample work that you can use to attract future clients.
Second, you'll want to be using these photos on your social media accounts, on your blog posts. All of these things can amplify your branding and, again, hopefully secure you more clients.
And third, it really safeguards your intellectual property and protects all the effort that you put into the setup and the design.
Yeah, so you've designed this space, you've poured all of your time and energy into making it beautiful and functional, and then you had these amazing photos taken.
If you keep the rights to the photos, what it means is that others can't use them for whatever they want without asking you first.
We've only had to enforce these photo rights 2 times in our career. The first was when a property sold and the new buyers thought that they could take screenshots of the photos on our Airbnb listing and also copy all of the descriptions and photo captions without our permission.
And the other time was a client put their property up for sale and didn't tell us about it, and they used all of our photos on their MLS listing.
That's another story that I think we talked about in a previous video if you want to go dig that up.
That photo's mine. That photo's mine.
Number 4, do make sure that you understand the local regulations.
Before getting started on anything, you really need to understand the local regulations to know what your client is entitled to do or not do.
Understanding the rules is a big deal, like the biggest deal.
Clients are coming to us, for our guidance and expertise, and we've become experts on what it takes in all the local cities in our area for permitting.
And this permitting process can affect the timeline of the whole project, so it is important to know these things. For example, in the city of Palm Springs, it can take weeks, if not months, to get your permit.
This involves inspections and a lot of paperwork, so getting this process started as early as possible is the way to go.
The other reason why you want to understand what the local STR regulations are is that it can change how you're designing the house based on who your ideal guest group is.
For example, in the city of Palm Desert, the restriction is 27 night bookings or more, except for a few exemption categories. There's a few small pockets of the city where short-term rentals are allowed.
So if the client's property can be operated as a short-term rental, we're going to be designing that space and outfitting it differently than we would if it were operating as a midterm rental.
Number 5, do charge for your services.
We have charged a wide range of prices for our setup services over the years.
First was for nothing, just a management contract.
Then it was like $500, I think.
Then the next time, I think we charged around $2,000, and we actually tracked our hourly commitment to the project, and that hourly rate was really, really bad.
Come on. Have you seen my hourly rate?
But we were just getting started and we didn't feel that confident, I guess, in asking for more. But now, as we have gained more and more experience over the years, our rates have increased with every setup.
At this point in time, our design fee is somewhere in the neighborhood of $12,000 to $16,000, and it depends on the scope of work. Also, that is in addition to furniture costs.
But we have this whole process down to a science at this point. So they're not just paying for our design and setup work, they're also paying for the speed and efficiency with which we run these setups.
If you're bringing skills, experience, and the creativity to the project, don't be afraid to charge for your time.
And remember that you're not just charging for interior design, you are curating an experience for these potential guests, and you're also adding a lot of value to the property. So you want to make sure you're being properly compensated for that.
Number 6 is to make sure you communicate your timeline.
Being upfront about the timeline and realistically how long you expect everything to take just keeps everyone's expectations in check.
The client will then also understand what responsibilities they have, like signing off on proposals and getting reimbursements done when you ask for them.
They'll understand your process and what they can expect to be done and when.
We don't like to commit to like X date on the calendar because you never know, uncertain things could come up, but we do like to share the general duration of each step of the process.
This is going to vary depending on the house and the scope of work for the project, but generally we can get a proposal turned around in about 7 to 10 days, and then typically a couple days after that for the client to review and sign off and send the deposit for getting the proposal in action.
Then it'll take 1 or 2 days to complete all the orders and purchases of items, and most of that will arrive within 10 days.
And that's because we are intentionally choosing products that are in stock. Like a lot of people choose, this awesome couch from West Elm, but you never know when it's actually going to show up, and it's not worth delaying your project for an extra 3 months just to get that couch.
Then once things start to arrive, our on-site effort at the property is usually between 10 and 14 days.
Now that's if everything goes off, without a glitch. But most of the time we can keep to that general timeline. This property in Palm Springs was pretty much on that track.
The only difference with that project has been after completing the proposal, there was a bit of delay in the client approving. They were in the midst of a refi and they wanted to get that refi completed before they signed off on the proposal.
Which made sense. So that schedule delay had to do with budget approval, and that brings us to our don't list. The first don't: do not go over budget without approval.
Being able to stick to the budget that you and your client set during the proposal process is very important.
If you spend more than you had mutually agreed upon spending, you'll not only be in breach of contract, but you're also going to be dealing with the stress and loss of trust in that relationship.
And if you plan to do the follow-on management of the property once it's set up, you can't lose that trust before you even really get started.
Not to mention that most people are pouring, a significant amount of their savings into these setups, and every dime counts. So to stretch that beyond their expectations without prior approval is just a recipe for disaster.
There might be things that were unexpected that do come up, but it's important to communicate that, get the client's approval, and figure out a way forward before just doing it yourself.
And second, don't overlook maintenance issues, even if you're just the designer, and don't neglect to look for them.
One of the first things that we do when we kind of take over and get started on a project is really do a thorough maintenance inspection.
Because we know that we can generally control the timeline of our own work, but if we have to throw in any major home repairs, that can throw off the timeline seriously.
Here's just a start of a list. You'll want to look at the HVAC system to make sure it's working and well maintained, change the filters there, check all the outlets and switches in the house. Also look for all the bathroom or kitchen GFCI outlets to make sure, when one trips, what goes out, and you know how to reset it.
You'll want to check that the irrigation system outside works properly, or have your gardener inspect that for you.
There are a lot of things, but what it really comes down to is we make sure to spend a lot of time in the house. We look for functionality of everything. We like to identify any quirks of the house or anything that needs to be repaired before a guest would come.
That's all for today. Let us know if you learned anything new today, and here's that video that we talked about with the contract and proposal process.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.